And I just realized I was muted the whole time, guys. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. I just saw it. So yeah, what's up, everybody? This is George C. Samuels. I am the host of today's show. I'm the managing director of Faiā. You're tuning in to Faiāside Chats. And today you're going to be listening in on my conversation with Patrick Thomas, founder of Gorilla DAO, a project that has sort of taken the Bitcoin SV community by storm. And one that I've really enjoyed sort of watching and observing. So huge admirer of Patrick's work. So yeah, without further ado, Patrick, do you want to join us here? There you go, brother. How's it going?
There we go. It's going good, man. How are you?
Doing good, man. Yeah, you know, as mentioned before when we were talking backstage, I've been really keen and looking forward to chatting to you because I know you actually wrote an article for me for CoinGeek, right? A while back.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, man. So yeah, I like your writing style and I like your community management style even more, especially, you know, with this new project. So I guess to get us started, maybe let's talk a little bit about sort of your career background, and then we'll talk more about Gorilla DAO.
That sounds good to me, sure. So I've been writing about blockchain cryptocurrency since 2017. And I guess it really all started when first my entrance into blockchain and crypto was somebody I went to high school with. It was 2013. He made a Facebook post talking about that he called it BitCents. He's like, I have 0.04 BitCents in my wallet. At today's rate, that's worth $40. And then he said, I think I'll throw a party with that money. Like, that was his Facebook post. And, you know, that sticks with me, and I have a screenshot of it somewhere. But that, to me, was my first exposure. And I'm like, BitCents, like, what is this guy talking about? What he really meant was that, like, he had 0.04 Bitcoin. But, you know, at that point in time, cryptocurrency was far along enough to the point where I could dive into it and have some materials to look at. So at that point, the guy Laszlo had already spent his 10,000 Bitcoin on the pizza, so I could refer to that. You know, there was all sorts of action going with the darknet markets. You could easily read up about that. But then something that really caught my eye was like the price of these things, of Bitcoin and Ethereum, and how fast it moved. So that was something I always kept an eye on. And then in 2017, I was in college at the time, and as a college student, I wanted some pocket change, some pocket money. And I'm like, you know what, I want to do some freelance writing. This is a topic that I've kept up with over the years. Like, it'd be great if I could educate others while also learning more myself. And that's what really took me the deep dive into blockchain and crypto. So at first, I started writing for my very first article was for a culture blog located in Philadelphia, which is where I live now. The blog's no longer around, but my first article was called "Whatever Happened to Bitcoin? Nothing Good." Because at the time, you know, 2017, like it was worth probably like 100 something. People were only using it for like darknet market transactions, and there wasn't very many good things to say about it. But, you know, afterwards, I always kept writing, and there was new information coming out. I wrote for coinidle.com. I wrote for cointelegraph.com. Worked with some marketing companies as well during like when a lot of digital currency companies were looking to have their products marketed. But then, you know, I came across Bitcoin SV when I was having a problem with Bitcoin fees. That's what really got my attention. You know, I wanted to send money from one of my wallets to another one of my wallets, and the fee was over $100, and that was just ridiculous. And then somebody on Twitter actually pointed out, they're like, hey, you want to look at this? And then I looked there, kept doing more and more research, and it just made a lot of sense. And for what I needed to do in terms of sending money or back and forth to wallets, it was a lot more efficient than something like Bitcoin, you know, that's supposed to be peer-to-peer electronic cash, but doesn't do a very good job of that.
Yeah, 100%. That's pretty fascinating, man. Like it's always interesting hearing what people's stories are, right? When it comes to Bitcoin and how they got in. It seems like everybody's sort of gotten a different angle or coming from it through a different way. But my next question for you would be, and I think this is more for people who might not be familiar with, DAOs in general, right? What is a DAO?
Yeah, so DAO, DAO stands for Decentralized Autonomous Organization. And I think a really good way to sum it up would be, at its heart, it's kind of like a perfect democracy or perfect capitalism, or the combination of both of those things, where it is really up to the members of the DAO to create proposals that are voted on that decide how the DAO operates. So like, if this was a country, if we're talking about democracy or a state, where usually, it's the people vote, but then it gets kicked up to like these elected officials who in the DAO, there is no structure like that. It's the people putting proposals out to the people, voted on by the people, which decides what the group does as a whole. And I think if we're looking at blockchain in terms of maybe existing DAOs, Ethereum is the place where, in my opinion, is where it began. I don't know of any instances of it, of a DAO existing before that. But I also think that, what we see, and I think the DeFi boom even inspired it, is that DAOs kind of picked back up again, but in this time in a way that it was successful. So I feel like that's what really inspired the Gorilla DAO to launch on Bitcoin SV, was that, we're always saying like, hey, Ethereum has this and Bitcoin SV could do it better. Ethereum has that, but we could do it better. But this is one of those gaps that was missing, in my opinion. So I thought, why not create a DAO, release it into the wild, and see where the members of the DAO take it.
Yeah, awesome. Love that. And why Gorilla DAO, right? We'll go more into the culture side of this, right? But why Gorilla DAO?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Gorilla DAO, I feel like that encompasses what a lot of crypto culture, where especially in the summer, people called it the DeFi summer, but you see people when they're making new investments, you see this in the stock market as well. Sometimes people are just like, all right, I'm going to ape in. And then, like when I would read these things on Twitter and all sorts of locations, people saying they're aping in. And I'm just like, like people are creating these DeFi tokens, people are buying stocks, but like, if these things really go hand in hand, I feel like it's low hanging fruit. Like, if somebody was creating like they have like Pickle Finance on Ethereum. They have, they have like Sushi Swap on Ethereum, but like, come on, you don't have Gorilla Finance, you don't have Gorilla Swap, you don't have the ape token. Like, come on. So to me, I feel like culturally it really fit in, and there was just a lot of synergy there. And I thought that was fun.
Yeah, 100%, man, and it's definitely working, right? Because I think it's on point, with the meme cultures, right? Like as I was seeing this on Twitter, I realized just how many gifs there are that you can use, right? Like, and that's the thing. A lot of people today are able to communicate using these gifs, these memes, and a lot of folks who aren't familiar with this culture really find it weird, right? So for someone who is maybe not in step with this type of culture, right? What would you share with them in terms of like why this works now and what's going on in the culture?
Yeah, so I'm happy you brought up memes and meme culture. And if you have your eye on Bitcoin, you're probably familiar with Twitch, but that's something the Twitch guys are very good at. And I admire them for that, and I appreciate like their ability to recognize things like that, because it shouldn't be overlooked that when something is popular or when something is trending, like it's we see this with NFTs where some people are just like, oh, this digital art, I don't get it. You could just take a screenshot. But the thing is, like, there's so many people interested in it. It has such great gravity. Like maybe there's something bigger going on. Maybe we haven't seen the best use case for it yet, but there really is something substantial there. So when it comes to I'm sorry, maybe I'm getting off topic. What was the original question again?
No. Just the meme culture, right? Like just explaining it, for people.
Okay. Yeah. So to go back to that, when it comes to Bitcoin, I think especially we see there's a lot of emphasis on enterprise use, which is really good. But at the same time, if we're serving enterprises, that's not a solution that could pop up in one day, 1 month, even 1 year. Enterprise solutions are a long time coming, because it's more than servicing a consumer where you can just put a product into the market and maybe it picks up traction, maybe it doesn't pick up traction, maybe people like it, maybe people don't like it. When we're talking enterprises, there's actual depending on how long-standing the industry is, maybe there's regulatory hurdles that they need to overcome, privacy issues that they need to make sure are like in check before they are able to put their data onto the blockchain. But a lot of crypto, and I think people could really learn this in 2017, was that like it's retail investors. You know, at a point there was a lot of retail investors and retail users. And that being said, I feel like just on more of like an everyday level, like a go outside, look at your neighbor, talk to your neighbor level, memes are something that people can understand. You know, memes are everywhere. I'm not going to say everybody's on Twitter, but you know, there's a really big audience on Twitter, and you see the memes going around all the time. You see what's popular, you see what's not popular. So I think the way memes play a role into this is that there's a lot of people in Bitcoin who might not be engineers, who might not be software developers, but really do want to play a role. They really do want to have a part. And I feel like Gorilla DAO fits in very well with that because everybody can play a role. You know, whatever your skill set is, you can bring it to the table. You can create in the way that you can create, and you know, it can create value in the world. And it really just goes back to servicing a different market. You know, sure, maybe one day it will service enterprise users, but day one, you know, I think it's something that retail investors, retail users, the everyday person could just really get behind and identify with. Like, okay, this is cool. I can identify with this. I can play a part with this. This is for me.
Yep, 100%, man. And I think that's a really important note, right? Because I think this, as you were talking about from the enterprise side, I think this is something that like the enterprise players don't get. And it's funny, you know, we know, like we hear Craig often talk about like, you know, what people don't seem to understand. And I know as much as I love him, he doesn't seem to understand this sort of stuff, right? Which is incredibly important in terms of getting people to sort of feel like they can actually take part in something. You know, boring plumbing is not something that's going to inspire people to get involved. And so, you know, what are your thoughts on that as well, right? You know, and sort of bridging the gap between like what we know Bitcoin is meant to be or intended to be, and sort of the missing layers.
I think that's an interesting point as well, because, you know, where a lot of people, I think they made a transition that was, they started with BTC. And then, you know, BCH forked off. They're like, okay, bigger blocks. This makes sense. And then Bitcoin SD was created, even bigger blocks, even more capabilities. This makes sense. I'm someone who went from BTC to straight to BSV. I didn't have this like sort of in between phase with BCH. And you know, I graduated college in 2018. So like sometimes when you talk to somebody, they're like, oh man, Craig was talking about that in 2015. Like 2015, come on, I was 1 year out of high school. Like I wasn't this guy who like followed each step he took, and you know, like and like his archive of work that I know is like vast. So I think that even provides a little bit of a different perspective. So, you know, from all the Craig work that I have read and in the conversations and talks I have listened to, he's spot on. You know, like he really knows what he's talking about. He really knows the protocol, and he makes some really good points when he's talking about like, hey, this is something that can work behind the scenes to optimize a lot of processes. And, you know, like this is where the value is in it. But at the same time, you know, it does come back to this cultural aspect where what he's saying is true, but maybe the way the consumers, or I'll just call it the market, like the demand the market has to use the technology, I think there might not be some alignment in that regard, or there is alignment in that regard, because I really do think blockchain technologies have found a niche when it comes to payment rails. And you see that with sort of big banks in America, like, you know, JP Morgan, like, sure, they have a private blockchain, but they said, like, hey, you know, if we settle payments like this internationally with our banking partners, we can save this much money, the payment gets settled this much faster, and that's important. But, you know, just on, I'll keep saying, like, an everyday person level, like, you know, you kind of walk outside the way your neighbors are using things, like, it's a bit different than at that very high level. So while I do think the plumbing is, and such is all very important, there's a whole different market that everyday people are looking at. And I think, you know, NFTs plays a really big part in that. Some tokens that actually have utility really play a part in that. So I think now that Bitcoin SV has tokens, we are going to experience, sorry, and see more and more of that.
Yeah, 100%. I know. I think you were the one who shared the news about the bill in Wyoming, right, being passed for DAOs. What are your thoughts?
So yeah, I took a dive back into that today. But you know, Wyoming is one of the states in the U.S. that is really innovating when it comes to blockchain digital currency, and it's clear that they want their law and regulation to be friendly, so they can attract blockchain businesses. I know Kraken's located over there. And Wyoming has a special charter that allows the businesses located over there to sort of operate on a federal scale. Because if you're in the US and you don't have this federal charter that either comes from the OCC or Wyoming, you have to apply for the licenses to operate in each individual state. So, you want to operate in 50 states, you got to apply in each 50, and that's not efficient. So what Wyoming is doing is great in that regard. Now, the Dow bill that they recently passed, it passed the Senate. So I believe it does have one more, round of voting to go through before it's officially approved. But, at first glance, from what I know about it and what my first read of it is that it will recognize a DAO as an organization. So I guess the same way you recognize, like, hey, he's an LLC, he's a corporation, this is this. DAO, will actually be recognized as, they operate a DAO, because I guess it's hard to sort of categorize that at the moment where it is this decentralized organization. So it looks like they're taking the steps to legitimize that in a way that, this is a whole new type of business structure. It didn't exist before. There was no demand for us to create a regulation like this before, but hey, now DAOs exist. People are really doing their thing. We need to recognize a DAO as an organization, I guess from a legal perspective. And, that'll really pave the way for a lot more. So I think they're doing great work over there.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really interesting, right? When we talk a lot about a law in relation to blockchains, and obviously different jurisdictions have different rules, how do you think, well, at least for you, right, and for Gorilla DAO, what's happening with Wyoming, are you leaning towards maybe setting up something in Wyoming as a result of this, or would you just sort of try to find your way around what already exists?
For sure. So, what I see so far is when somebody actually pointed the legislature out to me, it was a tweet originally, I think, and they're just like, hey, Gorilla DAO, look at this. And I sent it to the other eights, and there's interest. We're interested in this because, everybody wants the DAO to be successful. We all want to do all that we can do to make sure it can live forever. And I think, possibly setting up the DAO in Wyoming, and the only reason I say possibly is that, a community vote hasn't happened on it yet. But I feel like that really is a big step in the right direction and will help Gorilla DAO in the future. But I mean, in terms of the way we're navigating now, we're really experimenting. We're pushing the boundaries of Bitcoin, but at the same time, we're not doing anything illegal. From the jump when Gorilla DAO was released into the wild, hey, what you're buying is a membership into Gorilla DAO, and you're buying voting rights. Nothing more, nothing less. But I really do think it's important that more and more people will look into the Wyoming legislature on the table. And if that passes, I can definitely imagine, quite a few members of the DAO getting behind that and really encouraging, for one of our next steps, this is where we need to be. So I have confidence in that, and I'm really interested to see that legislature pass or to see what happens with it next.
Yeah. For those who aren't familiar, would you be able to, if you know enough of the story, talk about what happened with the DAO on Ethereum? Because that's a story in and of itself. And what were sort of the learnings there that you're taking into?
Well, the DAO on Ethereum is interesting because even in hindsight, when I think regulators really got a hold of it and looked at it, what they sold was securities. Because when they did their DAO, it's just hey, their token was called DAO, I believe, just DAO. That's what they were calling it, and they were the first DAO. But it's just hey, when you buy a DAO token, I guess the overview first is, the DAO was a project on Ethereum. If you buy the DAO token, what we will be doing is making decisions as a DAO, putting out proposals, voting on them. But their primary goal and purpose was to invest in other blockchain projects. And as those projects profited, they were going to pay somewhat of you would get a kickback on your DAO token. You would get some sort of a dividend on it. But I mean, when everything fell apart with that there was I don't even think it was a hack or a security breach, but there was a flaw within the DAO and the smart contracts and the way it was set up, where somebody was able to exploit the contract in a way where they were just able to drain all the funds to themselves. Now, that being said, and how Gorilla DAO operates, at the moment, there's an increasing demand for smart contracts on Bitcoin. but I'm not a developer, but I can say, it's not something that can be done readily on Bitcoin at the moment, unless you are an engineer and are really willing to take that deep dive and get it set up as fast as possible. So there are manual aspects to the Gorilla DAO at this point in time. It's changing. People are working on making it automated. But that being said, you really need to make sure your smart contracts are fortified and audited and looked at by several people. And something I like that members of the DAO are saying is like, we kind of need our own set in stone proposal. Bitcoin is set in stone. We kind of need our own set in stone. So some really good ideas I see in that regard, and something that everybody has already agreed with is like, hey, nobody can make a proposal that like you can send the funds to yourself. That's not something you can do. Like, so we're definitely taking steps to prevent problems that previous DAOs have had, especially the Ethereum DAO. And I think it is good that we can learn from that little bit of history and not make the mistakes that they've made.
Yeah, 100%. I remember hearing that you kind of, in terms of talking about pushing the limits, you had some issues with certain applications in the ecosystem, right? Not being able to handle what you were doing. So one, what were those issues? And two, what actually?
Yeah, so when it came to those issues, I think it's one thing where you can say on the Bitcoin network, like, hey, a stress test is happening on this day, and we're pushing this many transactions through the network, and every miner is ready for it. It's a whole different animal when Gorilla DAO appears on a Tuesday, and we need to send 700 transactions in an hour. And I think that's what happened, So 8 token requests needed to be fulfilled, and there was hundreds of them. And our tool of choice is Money Button at the moment. But on Money Button at the time, we were hitting the speed limit. And the problem with that is when you have too many unconfirmed transactions just waiting in queue, there becomes a point where you can't push any more transactions out there until like, you clear this unconfirmed queue. But I will say, I think that, one of the fastest ways to reach a company is through social media these days. Like everybody's listening on social media. And one thing is like, I was kind of encouraged that it would be more efficient to reach out to them directly. But, if Money Button saw an email from Gorilla DAO, like, are they going to respond? I don't know. I didn't try that one yet. But I do think social media is efficient. But they saw it on social media. I was fortunate enough to connect with some of the guys at Money Button and Fabric. They solved the problem right away. And I do think their experience is getting better in that regard. But so we were hitting the speed limit there. And, that was really the first instance that showed me personally, like with something very hands-on that, it's easy to understand the benefits of Bitcoin on a theoretical level, right? We all know how many transactions per second we can do. We know blocks can be, we know there's unbounded scalability, but it's a whole different ballgame. If you just appear on a random day of the week and need to get some certain things done that maybe that there a little more goes on to it, and that was one of the first instances that showed me that.
I like how diplomatic you were about that, because I know the exact tweet that you're referring to. And I think I responded to that essentially saying that, this is actually the best way to get attention as well. Like you're saying, I would agree with you. Like your approach there was great because, I've experienced this as well for many other organizations. They always say, please go through our ticketing system, but they may have this large queue, and going straight to social media is like public accountability, right? And someone can, make enough noise, right, to be able to get something fixed. So, I mean, again, I think that was an interesting remark in that sense. But I mean, that is today, right? Like that's how things get sort of sorted out.
Okay. For sure. I mean, everybody's on social media, and the thing is, every business wants to be a good business. They listen to their customers and they do solve the problems, which Money Button and Fabric did ASAP. So shout out to them. They did a great job. But, I mean, it's untested because the email wasn't sent first. But, like, come on, if you see Gorilla something in your email, like, I don't know how quickly you respond to them. Social media works. I'll leave it at that. Social media works.
100%. Public accountability, right? Just like Bitcoin in a way. Okay, it's good that I got a few questions down here, but I will leave it for a little bit later. Okay, what's been some of your most fascinating observations with the other apes in terms of behavior?
Sure, that's a really good question, man. So when it comes to that, I will say, at the moment there is over 100 members in Gorilla DAO. We made a pretty smooth migration from first we were in Twitch chat. That was another application that I feel like we broke in terms of, there was just so many members joining at once that I don't know if the network if Twitch chat was ready to handle that. Because once we got about 50 members, you had to refresh the page every time you wanted to see a new message. It was just so slow. So we had to migrate to a new channel, and in the new channel, there's probably about 150 Gorilla DAO members. And something that, been learning slowly is the way that problem solving is kind of being done, and that people are kind of going about problem solving. So at first, and I think this is just a Bitcoin problem, there was like a lot of these theoretical arguments where people are like, no, we can't do this with the 8 token because this, and then if anything was priced in the 8 token, then you're basically buying it with votes. And I think they're making a really good point, but I had to look at that and say, like, you're right, but nothing is priced in the 8 token. Like, we can cross that bridge when we get there. But me personally, just my style and my approach is like, first you have to move fast, and like some of these big things would take years if we actually decided like this is the first thing we're doing. We have to move fast and we have to move serious. So, that being said, it was just like, first we need an on-chain voting system. I know of 2 members in particular right now working on it. And from what I know, it's something we'll be seeing within 2 weeks. So first we need the on-chain voting system. Like something I really encourage other members, like we could argue theory all day. I know we can do it. It's Bitcoin. I've seen it happen before. But, I think some of the theoretical arguments can be saved for later. Of what we should use this for this. We should, I don't know, man. I think you really just need to tackle and get to the root of things at first. So that's something I thought was interesting and saw right away. The way that theory, it's an engineer developer driven community. So we have a lot of really sharp guys, but just the way that like theory is argued, like, and I think it helps that I'm not technical because like I just want to see stuff that works. Like I don't want to talk theory for too long. So.
Oh man, I'm so with you on that. I'm with you. I see this all the time on Twitter, right? So many people are spending so much time, debating about stuff. And okay, fair enough. There's merit in debates, right? But I can't believe I say that, but the reality, right, at least for us on the consumer side, is that many other projects are accelerating, right? And while people are sort of debating theory, we need practical solutions, right? We need to see things out. And this is why when I'm looking at our ecosystem, right, probably results do matter. It's one thing to put out a narrative saying this is, what we do and this is what we're about. But then if we don't see any sort of transaction output, right, at least if we're not getting the price hit, then what are we doing? So that's why I really love, your approach. And I think you're right that we do need to sort of push things, right, so that we can test ourselves before it really gets out of hand later on.
Definitely. And, I think that in particular showed me something else. And that was that, like, okay, we're done talking theory. Now people agreed we need the on-chain voting. It's on its way. There's a couple other big projects that are in discussion, like what the first big project that, the DAO puts its resources toward. That's another conversation. But, in all this process, even when it comes to things like 8 token distribution, it showed me that while smart contracts have existed on Bitcoin for a while, that there hasn't been demand for them in a way where, I could sit here where other gorillas could sit at their house and be like, okay, we're gonna whip up a smart contract today, and it's gonna go in this it's gonna go in this system, and it's gonna be used for this instance. Like, no, you actually need to be super sharp developer engineer to get that up and running ASAP. So I think that over time and in the near future, what we're going to see is more tools and resources that are easier to use and implement. They're going to have to come out because now there's a demand for these things. And I know I'm not the only one. We're not the only ones with that at Gorilla DAO. There's other people who want to do things like that. Like the guy at BitcoinToken.exchange. He's GMAD on Twitter and Twitch, but like he wants to automate what he's doing. And I had a bit of a conversation with him, and he needs smart contracts on Money Button's Simple Fabric protocol to do that. And he's just like, hey man, like, do we have these up and running yet? Like, is that what's happening at Gorilla DAO? It's like, no, that is not what's happening at Gorilla DAO at the moment. We're working towards that, but we need it to be easily available, and we need to get that implemented. But like that's something that really came out, that there is now a demand for these tools and resources that we've been talking about for a while now, and just their availability, access, and implementation, it needs to get easier.
Yeah, 100%. What has been, in terms of, what I find fascinating, right, especially like with the DAO, is that how quickly people are able to get involved, who are motivated to get things moving, right? Compared to, say, like a traditional business, like when you're setting up, right? Definitely things can move a lot slower. What are sort of the things that you see as potentially issues, right, down the line as well, with this sort of structure as a decentralized community, which is interesting, right? Because a lot of communities are often based on, like intimate relationships. But yeah, what are the things that you see?
Well, something it made me realize is that, like, people complain about like the political system moving so slow, and I don't think the DAO moves slow, but it makes me realize that, like, maybe why you can't move fast in a democracy, because, all right, let's say a proposal goes out. There's a discussion around the proposal. That goes back and forth, back and forth. There's the vote on the proposal. Maybe I don't. Let's say it fails. Just let's say it's a good proposal, but it fails. Then maybe it gets people thinking like, oh, you know what? Maybe I just wasn't clear. Maybe I didn't word that right. So something that I think we're seeing now is, when you make a proposal, you really have to nail down the details of what you're talking about, make it clear to understand. The voting period has to last for a decent amount of time, so people they can ponder it, maybe so the discussion can happen around it. That's one thing that we see. But I mean, overall, I like to think, like we say, like we like to think that it's all honest apes, right? So that, like, it is really a community in the sense that we are here to help each other. We are not here to fight with each other. So I personally haven't seen problems in that regard, because everybody's pretty unified. People would like the Gorilla DAO to be very successful, and really just doing all they can to make that happen. So haven't seen negatives from the community-driven approach. So that's positive, and that's a positive.
That's definitely a positive, my man. All right, another interesting thing that I noticed is that you chose to assign yourself as the community manager, right? Not a lot of people are, especially in this space, are aware of, like, I guess, the community management field. And why is that relevant in a DAO? And why did you take on that role as someone intending to sort of just pull yourself away, as opposed to anything else?
So honestly, at first, when I created it, it was I wanted to be like we talked about memes. I like memes. I wanted it to kind of be parallel to Bitcoin in a sense, where Satoshi Nakamoto, this anonymous figure, created Bitcoin. Kind of was there till it got up and running, then they walked away. So it was only like that for like 3 days before, like, I realized, like, okay, people feel more comfortable supporting, especially if you have to buy a membership and buy ape tokens if there's a face behind it. So that's when I'm just like, hey, I founded this. I'm the community manager until the training wheels can come off. But at first, that really was the idea, So 21 million Bitcoin exists. 2.1 million ape tokens exist. This anonymous creator created, Gorilla DAO. This anonymous creator created Bitcoin. I wanted there to be like parallels there. But yeah, because the reason that I choose to call myself the community manager, that I'm playing the role of the community manager until I don't need to anymore, is that, like, a DAO should run itself. And what gives me confidence is, like, we already see that happening. So the DAO is probably like 16 days old today. I think the official launch date was February 26th. So it's in its infancy, and I'll call the infancy its first 2 weeks. It's still in its infancy, but, like, I had to spend a lot of time behind the computer, 7 days a week, just like monitoring everything, doing this customer service a bit. But it should be running itself, and we're getting to that point where, each day I feel like I can spend a little less time. There's fewer sort of questions from the community, or other community members can answer questions for other community members, which is a great thing. But yeah, it should run itself. A DAO is leaderless. Sorry. Decentralized means without a leader, really. So there shouldn't be a sort of corporate structure, this person at the head of it. So, like, until I can stop fulfilling ape token requests, until that could be automated, that's really the only reason I'm here until. But right now, fulfilling ape token requests, have to manually tally the proposals that come through. These are kind of just like my roles as community manager at the moment. I've been in customer service, where maybe there's a time zone difference and I go to sleep, so like maybe somebody's on the other side of the ocean and they bought it at what's like 3 a.m. to me, and it's just like, hey, why didn't I get my 8 tokens instantly? It's because I was asleep, so like just kind of telling people those reasons, working through their problems, helping them solve those problems. But until things are automated, until we do have these smart contracts that are in high demand, I'm the community manager until that point.
No, what I love is that you actually very intuitively understand and know like what's required for these sort of things. And I think actually looking back at sort of the history of Bitcoin and sort of how Satoshi disappeared, I think that's one thing he was missing, a community manager, or at least this approach, because for someone who has been involved with community building over time as well, one of the things we learned is that like for any community, if you need to set the culture at the beginning, it is like you need to be there as a guide at the beginning, right? And then once the culture hits a certain point, then you can leave. But if you actually leave a little bit too early, prematurely, it sidetracks. And that's kind of what happened with Bitcoin as well. And the approach that you have is definitely, in my eyes, like the right one, because you're playing that role. It's not just about the thing that you created and you just release it into the wild, but you're also sort of curating and gardening in a way until it's able to just operate on its own. I think that's one thing a lot of people miss when it comes to either communities or starting something, right? Like, yes, the things should be leaderless, but at the beginning, you are the catalyst, right? You did lead it at the beginning. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that and that approach in this space?
Yeah, so I refer to the business being in the organization being in its infancy. Like it really is. It's 16 days old. Like it's not even a toddler; it's a baby. And like I guess if we're just thinking about life, like a baby, a toddler, like they can't fend for themselves. Like there needs to be this bit of support wherever it's coming from. That is able to like nurture it until it is on a point where it can stand on its 2 feet, where it can make its own decisions, where it really can go into the wild and survive. So I think there's a lot of parallels between that. And, I think when it is at that point is when we have these smart contracts that not only a select few can use, but like we can get it into the hands of like any developer. That would be a dream if any developer could create a Bitcoin smart contract. And it wasn't this like esoteric thing like, oh no, you have to know this protocol, but it's not interoperable with this protocol. Like, so there's some roadblocks to overcome, but I at the base of it, yeah, it's not very old at the moment, and for that reason, it's like a baby. It needs a little help from the outside, from people who can help it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a good analogy for people like setting up, communities or businesses. It's there are a lot of parallels with families in general, right? So at the beginning, great analogy with the baby. Like the ideal is that you're there and present, right, for that early stage. If you leave too early, it's the equivalent of just like abandoning your child, right? And it can go in any sort of direction. And then coming back later and hoping to be a part of that child's life, it's going to have issues.
Nicely put.
So, okay, I think what might be good is for us to pick up some of the questions from those who are tuning in. So I'll just scroll up to the top. Okay. Apes, you got a lot of ape fans in here, ape members.
I love it. So right there, shout out to all the gorillas watching this. Shout out to all the I appreciate every single member, the way every member helps each other, the unique skill sets everybody brings to the table, and like everybody is a crucial part of the success of the Gorilla DAO. So shout out to all the apes in here.
All right, got one from John from CoinGeek. What happens if a member is a bad actor or otherwise needs to be ejected from?
Sure. So when you go to our website is ape.capital. If you go to ape.capital, it says put your money where your mouth is. So let's say in theory that somebody wanted something to happen. It's the same as, how they kind of vouch. Well, in the sense that, you would have to really put capital towards making something happen if you wanted it to happen. Now, that being said, I think a majority of apes, and I honestly want to say all the apes in the Gorilla DAO, are honest apes. So I don't so you can't get thrown out of the DAO, in my opinion, unless maybe somebody created a proposal that, like, you know, this guy's ape tokens are invalid, and maybe that's a problem we have to solve down the road. But I think the thing is, since it's very community, it's all community run, that people recognize what a proposal that isn't positive for the organization is. Especially as we work our way to what people are calling, like, we kind of need our own set in stone, where you just know off the bat, or it's immediately invalid, that you can't do things like send all the money to yourself. You know, that's not possible. So I think that is actually the preventive measure of, you know, of what a bad actor in the DAO would be, that, like, kind of our set in stone, or very basic guidelines make it nearly impossible for you to be a bad actor.
Yeah, well said, well said. Got one from B here. What's your idea of success for members?
What's my idea of success for members? That's interesting. I'm just trying to understand that. So, you know, I think the thing is that, like, you know, it's whatever the members want success to be, right? You know, you join the Gorilla DAO so that you can play a role in the Gorilla DAO. I don't think it's not up to any one individual to be like, you know what, this is what success for the DAO looks like. This is what it looks like. It's a group decision what it looks like, and I think it can look like a lot of different things. It's up to the members of the DAO to decide what they want success to look like. You know, if a good proposal pops up, I think it becomes clear where it has like a landslide yes when it passes. So I think people favor some things over other things, but at the end of the day, you know, if you're a member, you know, please, like, put a proposal out there of what you think success is, and let the market decide if they agree with that or not.
Yeah, 100%. Can you talk about the status for converting to Run from B?
Sure, that's a really good question, because that's a hot topic, I think, even outside of the Gorilla DAO at the moment. So just like a brief recap of that is that, you know, from what I've heard with my conversations, especially with engineers and developers, is they gravitate towards Run protocol because it's permissionless, and I think that just gives you a lot more freedom when it comes to creating. I think the caveat is, in like a very too long didn't read version, is you have to be technical to really take advantages of that freedom that you potentially have on Run, right? The thing with Money Button is that it's permissioned, so you can only do what Money Button allows you to do. You know, like so I guess technically, like, there is a box, and you can't go outside this Money Button box. But there's benefits to both. That being said, so just back to your question, so I don't get too sidetracked. You know, we started migrating some Money Button users to Run, but then it came to our attention that, especially after I had a phone call with the guys from Money Button Fabric regarding the speed limit, and we talked about all sorts of other things, and I asked them if, hey, is it possible for the DAO to do this if we use Money Button? And they were supportive in the sense that, like, they said, yes, the things that we want to do are possible, and that they can connect us with somebody from the Money Button team, where if we have questions when it comes to developing, they could connect us to those people and, you know, give us clarity on that, and, you know, the tools and resources we need to make it possible. So, you know, when that came to light, we kind of hit the brakes on the Run migration. We're like, well, do we need to be on Run right away? And, you know, this is just me as a member speaking now, is like, I personally think right now there's more benefits to staying on Money Button, because even going to Run Relay X, I know several people have Money Button wallets, but I do think migrating to Relay X would mean some people have to create Relay X wallets. Yeah, I mean, long story short, I think Money Button is just really simple. If you're not a developer, it's also very user friendly. That doesn't mean that this is set in stone, though. You know, so at the moment things are living on Money Button. Maybe we decide that Run is best for the future, and we pick up the migration at some time. But at the moment, we've hit the brakes on that. The on-chain voting system is being built on Money Button. Like I said, I think we'll see that within the next 2 weeks, and then we'll take it from there. So,
good answer. Good answer. Okay, how do you see machine learning playing a role in the DAO?
Wow, that's an interesting question, because machine learning is huge, and I think that encompasses a lot of things. But so I'm just trying to think. You know, I'm not somebody who works on or builds machine learning type systems, but I mean, like, it could play. I'm sure it could play several roles in the DAO. You know, however people wanted to integrate it and make it work. maybe I need clarity on that. Maybe they could explain like what exactly they mean by that. That's like a broad question, but my answer is yes. Machine learning could be used in the DAO if the members wanted it to be used in the DAO. Feel free in the chat box to like maybe get a little more specific, but that's it for now from for me in that regard.
I love it because essentially it's like when people ask you, it's like, so what do you want? It's like, I want whatever the community wants, all the apes, what they want. That's the whole.
Well, to me, that one's just kind of a broad one. It's just like, can AI be used in the DAO? Like, probably, right? Like, so I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it.
Any word, this is from Preston Brown, any word on when Gorilla tokens will be traded on Relay X?
Sure. So first, shout out to Jack Liu and the guys at Relay X, because man, they do great work. What I really like about Jack and the folks at Relay is like they kind of just pop up with innovations. Like it's not announcements of announcements. Like they kind of faked everybody out like that yesterday. Like we're pre-announcing the announcement of the soon-to-be announced, but then it came 2 hours later. So that was amazing. Shout out to those guys. So for ape token to be traded on the Relay X DEX, which is just being called the Rex for anybody who is just catching up on this, for it to be traded on the Rex, like we would have to make that migration to run protocol 100%. Until that happens, I don't see it trading on the Relay X DEX because right now 99% of Gorilla tokens are on Money Button, and then the few people that we migrated, like I could literally count on my hand. There's probably like 7 to 8 people who have the ape token on Relay X. So for it to go on the DEX, 100% migration would need to happen. And we're not there yet. We hit the brakes on that, but there's no reason that we can't do that.
Okay. Next question. If run migration is put on, never mind if run migration is put on brakes, any plans on making Money Button tokens tradable?
Sure. So the thing is, Money Button tokens are tradable, and that happened the day before Relay X launched the Rex. If anybody's interested in that, you go to bitcointoken.exchange. The guy who created it, his Twitter handle and Twitch, he goes by GMAD. That's GMADD. So he launched an interface that does allow you to trade Money Button tokens, amongst each other from peer to peer. He's also looking for some automation aspects, but the thing is, it works. It just requires a bit of manual labor from each side. By that, I mean, like you put in your buy request, the individual who's selling the tokens receives the buy request, and then they have to swipe their token to sell it. So like it'll have there's potential for the time difference thing to happen as well, where maybe requests aren't fulfilled in real time, but rather, when the buyer makes his or her transaction, and then hours later, maybe the seller sees it happen and sends it back over. But that's the thing. Money Button tokens are tradable at the moment, which also makes me, as a member of the Gorilla DAO, just like positive, like, I say gorillas don't reinvent wheels, like we don't need to create these things that have already been created. That gives me a lot of confidence that like, it's very possible on Money Button. But yeah, check that out. If anybody's interested in trading Money Button tokens, it's bitcointoken.exchange, and it's really coming along. I like what GMAD has done. Shout out to him. He filled a crucial infrastructure gap, and I'm excited to see how that comes along.
Awesome. You said that you're not really a technical guy. However, you seem to still be far along more than most. So for people who are non-technical or feel like they're non-technical, what advice would you give them if they're looking to build a community in this space or do something as a non-technical person?
Sure. So I mean, something I've seen over time, and I guess I kind of maybe learned this before even coming to BSV, is that there's some engineers and developers, and I'm thinking of a guy specifically who lives in my town, who I would see at Ethereum meetups, where like he's super intelligent, and I honestly want to say this guy could build anything, but he's not somebody who's going to sit at his house and be like, I have this idea to build this, I want to build it. Like he actually is somebody who says like, I want to build something, but he wants to be part of a team. He doesn't want to be the captain. I do think there's instances that exist like that, where there's people who are eager to build, especially maybe if they're newer to developing they just want to get their feet wet with a project. I feel like if you're not technical, and maybe that's not ideal because you're looking for somebody who's like more of a senior developer, but regardless, that's a way to start making the steps that you need to take to get a project built. So I'd say in that regard, I think what it boils down to is like, how you need to talk to people. You need to be active in the community, whether that means you're on Twitter talking to others, you're on Twitch talking to others, you're at the CoinGeek conferences, which is I'd say probably the best place in the world to meet other people interested in Bitcoin, building things on Bitcoin, really making progress in the Bitcoin ecosystem. So if you don't have that skill set yourself, I say don't beat yourself up. Don't get down on yourself, because there are people with those skill sets who are looking to join a team. So you just need to keep your ear out for those opportunities, but you also have to be vocal about what it is you're doing, what it is you would like to do. And if it has some gravity, then I think it'll attract the developers.
Awesome. This is from Frank. How do members benefit from being in a DAO?
That's up to the members, once again. And something I say is like, when the Gorilla DAO, the ape token, was released into the wild, you can see it on ape.capital in the About Us page, where it's just like, hey, what you are buying is a membership and voting rights in the Gorilla DAO. Now, at the same time, that does not mean that the members would have to put out a proposal and vote on it. But if they wanted to have some sort of future utility that's beyond membership and voting rights, like maybe they could decide that. But at the moment, like you have voting rights in the DAO and a membership to the DAO. I think what's really positive about that is, as a member, you can take it wherever you want to take it. If it's a good idea, you'll see it's going to have support. It's going to pass. So, the benefits are whatever. I'd say the benefits are whatever a savvy member thinks up the benefits to be and puts out the proposal, and the proposal passes.
What are your thoughts on the NFT space that's forming at the moment?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because that's just such a hot topic in blockchain crypto, no matter what chain you're on. So NFTs are interesting to me because at first glance, I'll be completely honest, like I don't completely understand the craze. But I think at the same time, like if you've been hanging around blockchain and crypto long enough, like the market doesn't care that you don't understand. So, I think that's something I realized very quickly and tried to get behind, just a sense of like keeping up with the developments that are going on. Like an NFT sold for $70 million the other day. And what we're also starting to see is that like, yeah, that's right. What we're also starting to see is notorious auction houses, like they're beginning to be the ones to auction off the NFTs. Like it's not like you're on a sort of community built, very blockchain based like platform anymore. So, with NFTs, I think when something's popular, when something has gravity, when something's memeing, the market doesn't care that you don't understand. So if it's, all right, sure. Maybe you see it 1 week, people talk about it for 2 days. That's one thing. This has been around since the summer and it's really starting to pick up traction. Maybe there's more to it, So I personally think we haven't seen the best use case for it yet. I was actually listening to the Bitcoin Association meetup the other day, and Attila, man, he gave a great presentation where like, when he talks about NFTs, like I'm like, this guy really knows his stuff. I think maybe that's a good resource if you want to learn more. Go visit that that Bitcoin Association meetup. I don't know if it's online yet, but it's called the Americas. And Attila's presentation was great, where he has a very in-depth understanding of NFTs and where it could go. So I say keep your eye on that space. Try to really understand that the value in using like the blockchain as this medium for art and what that means and what you can do with it. It's not going anywhere. It's very popular at the moment. So don't try to ignore it and be like, no, this is a scam. No, I don't. No, the market doesn't care. It's going to go on without you. So just try to understand it.
What are your thoughts on marketing in this space? Right, there are some who believe that we need more marketing, quote unquote. Others who don't believe that in marketing itself. Right, they're saying that like products should sell themselves if they're good enough. What are
First, I think you had an excellent tweet a couple days ago where, if I remember correctly, it was like the Apple ad versus the another smartphone. Exactly, and like one's memorable, right? Like I just know what it looks like off the top of my head. And the Samsung one's like, these are the specs, like you get a camera that's this big and a phone that's this wide. Like, no, it shouldn't be like that. So when it comes to marketing, I think one thing the Bitcoin community also has to remember is that like, you play a role in that as well. I feel like it's like being a member of the DAO. Like you can decide the future of this thing. So, if you keep your eye on Bitcoin, if you hold Bitcoin, like you can decide the future of this. It's about the message you put out there as well. I think when a lot of people talk about marketing, they think that maybe there's like a head of the network that is supposed to kind of steer the way things go. And that's not true. You know, like it's up to every single person in the ecosystem to steer where this thing goes. I think, you know, for the most part, like that's what I would say in that regard. I don't remember, was there another part to the question or?
No, that's spot on. I mean, it's interesting, right? Like from a human behavior standpoint, that expectation of, you know, there being ahead, because I have seen people in the ecosystem and across all cryptos, right, where there's a group who will always be looking for leadership, even though this space came out from a sort of belief in that there should be no leaders. What are your thoughts on that from a human?
So that you make a good point, because, you know, like the DAO is not supposed to have a structure and it's supposed to be leaderless, but actually like one of the first things people start talking about is like, you know, we need a bit of a board, like where, you know, where like these are like the core gorillas, and like I understand where they're coming from, but that squashes the idea of a DAO. So it gets tough in that regard, but I think that falls back into the concept at hand, that like, you know, and I think that even goes to the developer thing I said before, where I know this really smart guy, but like he doesn't want to be a captain, he's looking for a team. So I think that might just be human nature, where you kind of have this one person who steps up, like we go west, and then, you know, like for some reason 4 other people are like, he's right, you know. I think that makes people comfortable, though. I think it gives people confidence when there is a sort of leader or leadership they can look to, who maybe they have a record of making good decisions, or maybe, you know, they just got a good head on their shoulders. So I feel like that is a human nature thing. When it comes to the DAO, and something I encourage is like, it's supposed to be structureless in terms of like there's not this hierarchy. But I do think humans look for that for some reason.
I mean, because yeah, if you look at just sort of like the evolution of marketing too, right? With influencer marketing and, you know, brands being encouraged to become more human, whatever that means, right? You know, to humanize the brand. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because it's almost like an antithesis of like the crypto space, right? And just the way that people ideally want to have these decentralized groups, but in some way, shape, or form, it seems to centralize usually somewhere, right? Like
that is it's interesting, and I think it's true that even though blockchain digital currency is decentralized at its heart, I feel like no matter what chain you look to, there's either a small group or maybe even one person that people look to and they're like, we follow this person's lead. And, you know, I feel like that's when it comes to Ethereum, that's why like Vitalik, I feel like he's tried to fall back over the years, you know, where like people really were looking at him as like, this is the leader of Ethereum. I feel like his social media presence has like vanished, you know, and that's not like by accident. That's like him falling back so this thing can be more decentralized. But, you know, it's tough, because I guess unless you do have a voting structure that like maybe not much is going to happen. So I think, you know, I think to solve that, there needs to be consensus. You need a consensus mechanism, and that's why proof of work works, right? Like you need to be able to come to consensus if you're decentralized, or even when you're centralized, there's consensus mechanisms. But like, because anarchy doesn't work, you know, and I guess like unless you have something coherent that ends in a result, it just needs to end in a result. You're going to have anarchy, and that doesn't work.
Yep, 100%. We've got another question here. How does it feel to be a representative of a decentralized space like Gorilla DAO? Do you look at other representatives of decentralized stuff like CSW? Okay, there's a few questions here. Do you take influence? Do you see this in the chat box by any chance? From Preston Brown. Let's see if you can.
Let me do a bit of scrolling. It seems okay. Yeah, I do see it, and I'll just read it out. I'm going to read this out loud for the audience. Okay. How does it feel to be a representative of a decentralized space like Gorilla DAO? Do you look at other representatives of decentralized stuff like CSW? Do you take influence from that, or do you look at that as a learning/correcting experience? So, you know, I'll just answer the question. I was going to say I was going to work backwards, but, you know, it's all going to get answered. So, I mean, I think the positive thing about Gorilla DAO having a community manager is that like I can sit here with you, George, and talk to you, and it's not like this. It's not complete chaos. I'm just a member of the DAO though. So like when I talk, I think it's important to keep that like I'm talking from my perspective as a member of the Gorilla DAO, and the things I'd like to see happen in the DAO's future. But at the same time, I am a mouthpiece in the sense that like I do tally up the votes. Like I know how many people voted for this, I know how many people voted for that. I push that out to the public. I know how many ape tokens are in circulation. I distribute that to the public. So I think, like we said, the business, the organization, business, whatever you want to call it, it's in its infancy, and it just needs that group of people to nurture it until it can stand on its own feet and walk away. So being able to be one of those people doing that right now, it's a positive thing. So that's how I'd answered the first part of the question. Now, when it comes to representatives of other decentralized stuff, like I said, like I was never in tune with with a lot of CSW stuff until I really turned my attention to BSV shortly after it forked from BCH. So the thing is, like, I have conversations and people be like, oh yeah, Craig said that in 2015 during this talk, and like I just don't know what they're talking about. Craig's a super intelligent guy, and like I think there's a lot to learn from him. But like that's not one of the people I look to in terms of like, no, that's not one of the people I look to at all in terms of like representing something, an entity. I think that there have been successful DAOs on other blockchains, and that's for sure. And I also think there's a lot of really respectable people throughout the blockchain digital currency ecosystem, even outside of Bitcoin, where you can just tell these guys have really sharp minds. Wisdom is everywhere. So like, even people call it the DeFi summer, but like, the people who looked at that and they saw that NFTs were something and they ran with it, like, come on, like that's just like this level of intelligence, or even just like willing to try something that was successful, and more people need to do that. So I don't look to CSW. I appreciate Craig, and I know he's done a lot of good work, but that's not one of my role models. So, and then the last part of this question, I think I might have answered it here, but do you take influence from that, or do you look at that as a learning / correcting experience? So like I said, Craig is not the person I look to. He puts out a lot of great information, super intelligent. Never talked to him in person, so like I look forward to the day where like we could chat in person and I can learn from him like that. I know I have a lot to learn from him, but I think more of my big influences and like role models are people, even on other blockchains, who are just like doing their thing. Like people who, like a lot of people see something like a rebase token, and I feel like in Bitcoin SV we go like, oh, that's a scam. It's a but like no, maybe he's onto something. Like let him experiment with it. If it has gravity and picks up traction, let it happen. If it doesn't, it'll fizzle out. It's not going anywhere. So there's a lot of good examples in blockchain, crypto, regular business world that I think I look to, and I'm like, these guys, I like their style. Let me see what I can learn.
Perfect. And damn, man, time flies. We're already at the 1 hour mark. So on that note, I might ask you one question that you can leave with everyone. And that is, if there's any like one piece of advice that you'd leave for those listening in, both now and also with the recording after, right? What's that piece of advice that you'd leave for them?
Wow, big question, man. That's a tough ask. So I think the piece of advice I'd leave, especially since Bitcoin is at like such a pivotal state right now. I think tokens really just like unleashed this wave of innovation that we were not seeing in previous years, where people are filling crucial infrastructure gaps, like the guys at Bitcoin Token.exchange, the guys at RelayX with their exchange. So people are really pushing it, and I like that a lot. So my advice is like right now, I think it's a really good time to either join a team and really get going with things, to learn how to develop on Bitcoin, so you could play a role in that regard, but to keep pushing limits and being creative. Like that's just my advice. Like now is the time to push limits, be creative. It feels like almost like a bit of a renaissance, where like it's just like, okay, like we didn't have these tools available to us before. Like even if that just means implementing a token in a useful way in your business model, like it just like, I don't know, I just feel like right now in Bitcoin there's just like this energy that's unmatched, that just has not been there in the years before. And I think one reason I feel like that is that like, because now the community can play a role in it, right? Like it's one thing to see the Bitcoin businesses serving up enterprise solutions, and like all you can kind of do is like sit back and wait for that. So like I'm not gonna, don't wait for number to go up, but like if that's the position or that's what's taking place, like all you can kind of do is sit back and be like, well, I hope their project goes well. Like I hope they can put the data on the chain. But like, no, now it's a point in time where like you can really boot something up yourself. It could pick up traction. A lot of things have happened like that in very recent months. So there's no reason that like you can't be one of those people who are pushing it like that, or joining a team that's just pushing the boundary like that. So now's the time, you know, like full steam ahead. People really need to put all hands on deck and move forward and make progress.
Awesome, my man. And on that note, yeah, I just want to thank you for your time, brother. Really look forward to the evolution of Gorilla DAO. And I know I'll definitely be seeing you, you know, in the Twitter sphere and, you know, other events and things. Got some, I don't know if you saw the messages from Kurtz and John there about the hair, but
I did not.
Well, what's it like to have hardworking, intelligent, talented, and have good hair? What's it like? Essentially, what's it like having good hair? That's how. What's it like having good hair?
Wow, man. I mean, George, you could answer this question just as well as I can. But
hey, both of us.
We take it day by day. You know, that's all I can say.
Exactly.
No, but honestly, thank you so much for having me on here, George. Like, I really appreciate it. I'm really happy that we can discuss all these things. And something I really like about you and appreciate about you is like you do see like the cultural the significance of like how culture and art plays a role in developing and just creating a successful community that thrives. You know, all too often, this is a very engineer-driven space, and we kind of just focus on technicals and pushing that forward. But like, no, culture, community, and art just as important, if not more important, in making something successful and having something thrive. So I really like how you see that in things, and I'm happy I could come on here and we could kind of chat about some of those things.
I'm sure we'll have more conversations, brother. And thanks for your time too. And for everybody else, guys, thanks for joining us today. We'll share the link to this and also put in the links so that you can follow Patrick and also, yeah, go and buy your tokens too, your ape tokens. On that note,
ape.capital/transact, ape.capital, give it a look. But yeah,
I put it in there for everybody in the chat. Guys, go visit the URL. All right, take it easy, y'all.
Thanks so much.